Hello from Rachel and from me. First tonight, after 2 years of disruption for passengers, rail operator Northern is to be stripped of its franchise and brought under government control. The service, which is owned by Arriva and runs throughout Cumbria, has been heavily criticised by the government for widespread cancellations and delays.
We're going to get reaction from Westminster in just a moment, but first our reporter Lewis Warner is live outside Carlisle railway station. Lewis, what will the difference be for passengers?
Well, it's all change on the Lakes Line, the Cumbria Coast Line and the Settle to Carlisle line. The government has effectively ripped this up. It was the contract between them and Northern to provide the service. So what will all of that mean for passengers? Well, the government say that they can provide a more reliable service, but Northern say it was the infrastructure that was letting them down. Now, the government kind of had two options here. Either give Northern a new, shorter contract with revised terms or scrap it altogether. We know now that's what they have done, but they say it was a last resort. It's been a bumpy ride for Northern Rail passengers over the last few years. Today's announcement intends to counter the poor punctuality that passengers have suffered. Just 56% of Northern trains arrived at stations within 1 minute of the timetable in the 12 months to December last year, compared with the average across Britain of 65%. Today, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said there was now an improvement plan in place.
I think it's some really simple things that should be done. Trains need to turn up. On Sundays there's been almost no service at all. The trains need to be cleaned, so we've ordered a deep clean of all the trains and a schedule put in place. Some very basic things. But I've also asked the operator of last resort, those are the people who will now be running this network on our behalf, to come up with a 100-day plan, a plan within 100 days, in order to do some of the medium and long-term things which will improve this service.
The franchise was taken over by Arriva, running under the Northern brand in April 2016. Plans to electrify the Lakes Line were cancelled in March 2018. That meant a new timetable launched in May 2018, sparking major delays and cancellations. In June 2018, no trains ran at all due to staffing problems. On their return in July, the problems continued. The service did get better, and in August 2019 brought long-awaited new trains, but the company's financial difficulties continued. Until earlier this month, it announced it just didn't have the money to continue.
The vast majority of issues that Northern has faced has been outside its control in terms of what it can do to address the service. Now, it's very much our desire to see a smooth transition of services, both for the staff in Northern, but also for customers too.
Passengers who've had to put up with the struggling service today had mixed views on whether renationalisation could help things.
Yeah, possibly, yeah, it could. It could be great.
I hope so. Can't be any worse than it was.
I hope so, yeah. Get there on time and things. Yeah.
I'm not sure because it's been that long since they were privatised. You know, I mean, I was only little when they changed over. So I think we'll just have to wait and see.
I think in the short term, we're not likely to see very much difference. The infrastructure remains the same, the trains remain the same, the staff on the ground remain the same, but the Department for Transport is always struggling to know where the north of England is, and it's set up the transport for the north and saying, well, you can get on with it.
The government say they'll be using new technology to identify where more trains are needed to deal with overcrowding. They'll also be extending platforms at 30 stations to allow for longer trains. And good news for passengers, all the carriages will also be deep cleaned. Well, Arriva were due to be running this franchise until March 2025. That'll now come to an end 5 years earlier on the 1st of March this year. So for the people who work on the trains, thankfully they'll keep their jobs. Their contracts will be transferred to the public sector. And as we've heard from passengers, there are still worries that these problems won't be fixed overnight.
Lewis, live at Carlisle Station, thank you. Let's join our political correspondent Martin Stew, who is in Westminster for us tonight. Martin, this is a huge decision for this Tory government, isn't it?
Yes, it is, although there is precedent. They did it back 2 years ago with LNER, the train operator that runs the East Coast Main Line. I suppose the challenge is, even though they are renationalising, much of it stays the same. It's the same staff, it's the same trains, and it is the same train lines and infrastructure too. So without extra investment, potentially not that much will change for passengers. That said, it's still been welcomed by the Westland and Lonsdale MP, Tim Farron.
Well, it's been a 2-year-long campaign for those in Cumbria who've been calling for the government to sack Northern, and finally they've got round to doing it. Delayed, but and not before time, but a really welcome boost for all of us in Cumbria who rely upon those trains that so very often are unreliable themselves. Of course, one of the problems is now the government from the 1st of March will be responsible for those trains, and as a result they need to show in advance what they're going to do differently.
And one thing they'll need to do differently, potentially, is change staff's contracts. Many of the staff who work for Northern aren't contractually obliged to work at weekends, which seems a bit strange when you offer a 7-day service. And that's one of the big problems that Northern have had, where you've had sickness at weekends, staff haven't stood in, you've had cancellations. That renegotiation, though, won't be easy because, understandably, staff and unions will be cross. Just one of a lot of things the government are going to have to try and sort out to get this service back on track.
Indeed. Martin Stew live at Westminster. Thank you.